Welcome to our special edition of Courageous Conversations for Grief Awareness Month. In this episode, Griefline's Louisa Smith is joined by Dr. Moira Junge from the Sleep Health Foundation. Dr. Junge shares facts and insights into the sleep health of Australians and offers practical tools and advice on how to combat poor sleep, particularly when coping with grief and loss. Thank you very much for joining me, Moira Junge from the Sleep Health Foundation. So I'm going to get straight into it, and I'd like to ask you about Australia's sleep health. So I guess, are Australians' sleep habits good, bad, otherwise? What is it currently? Are we affected by the recent economic, global, political events? Does that affect our sleep patterns and the prevalence of sleep disorders?
Absolutely. I think people do sleep poorly when they're stressed and worried. It makes sense almost on a biological level to not be feeling, if you're feeling sort of sad or worried or having these hormones in you that are similar to when you're fearful. Imagine our primitive ancestors that would have had that kind of adrenaline, etc., if there was a bear outside the cave. And so when you actually are under threat, or not feeling comfortable and feeling alone and feeling worried, fretting, then you will actually, unfortunately, have more difficulty sleeping. But the good news is that we can try and calm our bodies down before bed, so we're not accidentally giving ourselves the wrong signals that there is not a bear outside the cave. We don't need to be alert and vigilant, because it's actually like a safety mechanism to keep us alert if we have to, fight or flee in a hurry. So we want to make sure that we don't have that. So yes, Australians at the moment, we know that last night, about 50% of Australians didn't sleep well. Wow. But it doesn't mean that we know about maybe 12 to 15% would have a sleep disorder known as insomnia. And maybe 10%, there's lots of different statistics, might have sleep apnea. Some might have a combination. So we probably around about 20% of Australians have a sleep disorder, which is huge on a population level.
Yeah.
And then about 50% just don't sleep well from time to time, but don't have a disorder. So it's really significant. And that's why we're really happy that's why we exist as a foundation, to provide information and support. Well, we don't have a helpline like, you have. We'd eventually like to have a sleep line that people can actually ring up and talk about their sleep in the moment.
I would imagine that talking about it and just shedding that weight of whatever you're thinking that's preventing you from sleeping or you're feeling, and just share that with someone else may actually alleviate a lot of that, concern when you are trying to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Absolutely. I think so. There'd be some really hot tips that'll be really helpful in the moment, which I know is not necessarily the purpose of our chat today. But, people to know that there's lots of things that can be done for sleep. But sometimes, just in times of difficulty, for whatever reason, that you will have periods of not sleeping well, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I guess it does help to maybe expect that as well and normalize it.
Yeah, I think so. And because I know even me, I've had decades of sleep expertise. And when I'm in the depth of losing family members or just a difficult time, I'm texting, I'm doing an email to colleagues saying, do you know any good sleep people? It's sort of indicating, I'm up. I can't sleep. Sometimes it lasts for a number of weeks. And I'm lucky that I haven't, I've normalized it. I know that that's just what happens. I haven't tried. But sometimes I've seen in my clinical world, people who have come in to see me, and I think they're about 60 something. And they say, oh, yeah, I sort of started sleeping poorly after my first baby, or after my first baby died, or some terrible thing happened. And you know that it was decades ago, and it's been that long. So I never want to see people having decades of sleep problems, because there's things we know now that we didn't know that can help people that not have something that acutely you will have sleep problems, but that it doesn't become a chronic condition many, many years later. That's what we just don't want to see happening.
No. Well, I guess that's a good segue into the next sort of theme, which is around mental health and sleep. So we know there is a relationship between mental health and sleep. And for those who suffer or sleep, whose sleep is sort of, I guess, contributing to their mental health challenges, where should they begin seeking support?
Yeah, that's a really important one because it's a real chicken and egg scenario with sleep. And until about 10 years ago, people only thought sleep problems were a manifestation of that person's anxiety or their depression, that was the problem. And so only seek help for your anxiety or depression, etc., your mental health. But now we know, maybe at least 10 years now, to sometimes seek the sleep issue first. Like, just try to work on your sleep, even if you're currently seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist or counselor. Actually, we always say dedicate a couple of sessions at least to just the sleep. Like, really work through what's going on with your sleep. Is it just your mind racing? Could it be biological, as in your body clock? You're just not actually trying to go to bed at 8 or, say 10 p.m. when your body clock really wants to go to bed about 1 a.m. So those sorts of, sometimes there's very practical things that can be sorted out. And then once you're sleeping a bit better, the mental health symptoms are so much better. The medication can work better. You don't feel, when you've had a little bit of sleep, your worldview is so much different. You just see that, it's really, it's apples and oranges sometimes when you've had a bit of sleep, with how you can cope with whatever else is going on in your daytime life.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think, but most people know, like nearly everyone I've ever spoken to do know whether they sort of know whether it's the mental health issues or it's the sleep that's the main thing in terms of chicken and egg. And so we really encourage people to know that you are your own expert with your own health. You know yourself better than anyone else. Even someone like me who's worked as a psychologist for ages and ages, I know lots about sleep. I know lots about mental health. I never really know as much about you, Louisa, than you know yourself. You know that what's going on. You know really what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're suffering with. So I think that, yeah, you really make sure that you take the lead with saying, yeah, this is, I think I've done a bit of, we call it scientist practitioner, become your own personal scientist. And,
Yeah.
just sort of think about it. I think, yeah, everyone's done year 8 science, like experiments of just sort of working. You just sort of do something, think, yeah, get results, have a think about, analyze the results, and think you sort of are halfway there sometimes, when just do a bit of self-reflection. And
Yeah, that is such great advice. And I've never really heard it from that perspective, but it is absolutely true. We
yeah,
are our own experts when it
we
comes
are, to
to
some
our own
extent.
bodies and minds.
Yeah, you don't want to.
We
You also
probably,
need to lean into health professionals
that's
and get
exactly,
support, but
yeah.
just in that self-reflection sort of piece.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. So I'm going to tap into your psychological expertise. I had some personal sleep challenges over the journey, and in
Yeah.
particular, I go through periods, particularly when I'm suffering from stress or I'm concerned about my family, and that'll often play on my mind at bedtime,
Yeah,
or
of
or
course.
I'll wake up in the middle of the night and there it is again, and I really struggle to get back to sleep. So focusing on my lack of sleep seems to worsen it. So how can
Yes,
someone break that cycle?
that's such a good point. And I think one of the key things is to not lie in bed awake, worried or sad, or so even if you thought, I'm tired, I'm ready for bed, you go into bed, and then your mind's racing, and then you're like, oh, quite upset about being awake too. Like, you get frustrated
Mhm.
by it and
Oh, yeah.
concerned about a lot of stuff about the next day. So making sure that you don't try, if you're awake and you're in bed and you're frustrated by that, if it feels like it's been at least half an hour or so, you must go get out of bed, and
Okay.
and go either sit up in bed if you don't have somewhere else to go, or if you're going to disturb a bed partner, or so sitting up somewhere else, preferably outside of the bed,
Hmm.
and wait till you're sleepy and tired again. So maybe that might be 5 minutes later, it might be 2 hours later, but not to watch a clock. Don't just think, well, I'll just start afresh. I thought I'm going to, because I can't, it's not like I have a rule of thumb, don't lie in bed awake and really alert and particularly frustrated for what feels like at least 20 or 30 minutes. Just don't do it, because it's just not compatible with getting a good night's sleep. You have to be in bed happy, relaxed, sleepy, dozy, not really even knowing what day of the week it is. That's for sleep. And anything else, it's out for on the couch. or the
Mm.
chair, or do some reading, do some listening to podcasts, do some TV, nothing
Yes.
too stimulating, and making sure you're in the dark, because
Yes.
it's really important to not have too many lights on, or handheld things, because of the bright light. It's stimulating, and also some people can be very responsive, like a bit reactive to the blue light component. And our sleep, our hormones such as melatonin really need they really like dark conditions to come out and be produced. So I think, yeah, dark, quiet, non-stimulating, not too hot, not too cold. That's the other thing about, people are sometimes just too hot. Like they've got the heaters on, they've got their socks on, they've got pajamas on. And we really should be sleeping in kind of a room that's less than 20 degrees, about
Yeah, right.
17,
Okay.
18-ish. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah,
so
I actually do find that I do sleep better if I've got a cooler
yeah,
room. I
yeah,
might, have pajamas on and I'm
yeah,
nice and cozy, but
yeah,
outside the bed, it's,
yeah, absolutely. Because
yeah.
once they're in the bed and the cover, even if it's a sheet, or especially a doona, you trap we're all about 37 degrees. So we
Mm,
trap that in, and we're feeling warm, body temperature warmth. But yeah, you don't want the external air to be too hot. And you don't
mm,
want your mind to be too racy. There's so many factors. No wonder 50% of people on any given night have a bit of difficulty sleeping,
yes.
because
Yeah.
there's a lot of complexity, because we haven't even discussed all the 24-hour devices, etc., that's
Oh, yeah.
happening.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've been around long enough that wasn't a thing. Like I saw people clinically in the 90s for sleep problems, and teenagers, young people, old people. It wasn't necessarily around their device use, because no one really had. It wasn't like the phone wasn't even in the bedroom, or people
Yes.
who did have a mobile phone. So it's not only the phone; it's actually the same thing still apply. It's actually just more that addiction to something, and
Mm,
whether it's knitting, whether it's reading, whether it's just not wanting to go to bed because you just think, I just want to have more me time. That's what happens a lot of the time. People just put off going to bed for more me time, or for just more, getting worried about how frustrating it is in bed, if they don't think
yes.
they don't want to be tossing and turning. So I think making sure that if you're not a great sleeper, you're having a bad patch, reduce the time you're in bed. You actually just sit up a bit later, write it off. Just think, well, if I get 4 hours, I'll be wrapped tonight, and then I'll see
Yeah.
what happens tomorrow night, etc., etc. And then you build back up to what's a reasonable thing for you. And most adults in Australia, we say 7 to 9 hours is what's recommended.
Hmm.
But with knowing that not everyone will get that every night.
Yeah.
Um, so
Can you have too much sleep?
yes, you can. There's recommendations around, like if you're getting routinely, say, more than 10. I mean, teenagers need more and kids need more. But we're talking about adults here.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can, that feeling of just like, especially when you might sleep in, you think, oh, I feel worse. There wasn't any benefit. Like that extra hour or two wasn't any benefit. So
Mm,
sometimes we can sleep too long and feel a bit sluggish. People who sleep a lot, sometimes you really want to think about, um, you know, other issues like iron deficiency, mental health issues, thyroid issues, um, sleep apnea. Like a lot of people who are super sleepy all the time, they might not realize that they've either got they're snorers and they just keep waking themselves up all through the
mm,
night,
mm.
or they don't know, especially if they don't have a bed partner, or they might have restless legs and feeling like they don't. It's only when they're asleep that their legs are sort of kicking, and it keeps waking them up accidentally, or not accidentally, just sort of subconsciously. They're not aware. They think, why do I feel so awful when I've only had 7, or I had 7 or 8 hours, had my good lot of hours.
Mm.
Yeah. So we can sleep
Yeah.
too much as well.
I
And
remember when Dad was helping me with my renovation and he would fall asleep sitting up.
ah,
And I was just like, how does he do that? That's
yes.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like,
You thought it was a superpower.
yeah. But he was, we found out it was sleep apnea. So
Yes.
years later, and this would constantly happen. We'd go to a football game and we'd be at the MCG with like 80,000 people, and he'd fall asleep. And
Wow.
then
Yeah.
he went and got tested and found out that he had
Must have
quite
been
a
quite
severe
severe. Yeah.
case of sleep apnea.
Yeah.
And look, it's changed his life now that he's addressed it.
Oh, I'm
It
so happy to
was
hear that.
very concerning at the time, and
It
it went on
is.
for quite a few
Yeah.
years. And he used to be a pilot, and
Oh my
that was
gosh.
his, yeah. And so it kind of didn't kick in until after he retired, which is great.
Yeah.
But, I
It's
mean,
good for all of us on
there's a
that
lot of
plane.
checks and balances in place to prevent that from happening. But I think it was just, and he put the brakes on, and in his life. And before then, when he was, a professional pilot, it was just go, go, go all the time. And
Yeah.
then I think when he retired, it was just, I think there was a lot that must have
Yeah.
happened in his
Yeah.
body and mind.
Yeah.
And now, like, he's back to work full time because he just needs to keep busy and active
Oh, isn't that
and
great?
sleeps
I'm
better
so
than
happy.
ever as
That is
well.
that's such so important because we think 80% of sleep apnea is undiagnosed. Like
Mm,
most people don't know they've got it. So it's important because it affects, obviously it affects you with increased risk of accidents,
yes.
but
Yeah.
increased risk of longer term, cardiovascular health, mental health. Um, it's just something that people should get checked out if you're sleepy all the time, and
Mm,
particularly if you're a known snorer. But even if you're not a known snorer, we call it EDS, like excessive daytime sleepiness,
yes.
like
Right.
which sleeping at the MCG, sitting up, is excessive daytime sleepiness. So yeah, you need
Yeah,
to get checked out.
it
Yeah.
was quite extraordinary to witness.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is good. That was a happy ending, that one. So
Yeah.
I guess we're here to because we've got a mutual I guess interest and concern for the sleep health of people in Australia, and particularly from Griefline's perspective in Grief Awareness Month, we're trying to raise awareness for all different things that affect people who are grieving. And sleep deprivation is a big thing that affects people
Mm.
who are processing a loss in their life and many, many different types of loss. So where the feedback we've received is that, nightmares, insomnia, general sleep disturbances are common among those who are grieving and experiencing grief, affecting all ages. So I guess how can we raise awareness and support ourselves or our loved ones who are struggling with sleep during times of grief?
Yeah. So during times of grief, the first thing to remember is that you've got to normalize and almost expect that you won't sleep as good as you normally do. Some people do. Some people sleep for Australia. They say, I just want to actually curl up and sleep more. And that's okay as well.
Mm.
But for those that just think, I just can't believe it. I go to sleep and I wake up and it's an hour later. Like, it's 11 o'clock. And I think, how can that happen? I'm so tired, but unable to sleep. And it's just because the grief and the sadness and the adrenaline and whatever's pumping, sometimes it's a shock as well.
Mm.
There's so much complexity going on in our bodies and our nervous system and our hormones that it wakes us up and stimulates us, which is so ironic. It's the time we need to sleep the most. So it's important to just go with it. To think, just, yeah, as we talked about before, just the same things apply. Don't lie in bed awake getting frustrated. Perhaps just sit up a bit later, watch some movies, do some comforting things like that. Making sure you do be kind to yourself during the day. So try not to be all things to all people because it can be very busy too, particularly very acute grief.
Mhm.
Organizing funerals and all the logistics is just exhausting. So making sure you ask for help, making sure you even give yourself permission to have daytime naps if possible, particularly if you're thinking, I just can't even get through this next thing. I need to just have a quick little lie down. So making sure you do that as well. Being very aware of caffeine and alcohol, keeping them to a minimum or avoiding them altogether in challenging times. So sort of sometimes just set people off to be not that helpful, or if they're really helpful to you, just in minimal amounts. Like just be really mindful of not overdoing either of those, or other drugs. And food, making sure you do eat as well as you can, like have nourishing food, because that actually really affects your sleep. And exercise, being out in the light as much as you can. So even if you're having really poor sleep, try to still do some walks, some brief, gentle things Try and be out in the daylight as much as possible. And again, in the evening time, unwinding as much as you can, being in dim light conditions. Because if you actually turn all the other overhead lights off and just have lamps, don't do too much screen work, really giving yourself to permission to unwind, like the good old fashioned, a bath or a shower, nice cup of herbal tea, a little tiny snack before before sleep can help with some people. So just being aware. I mean, Sleep Health Foundation's got, good healthy sleep tips, etc. that you can. We've got 100 different fact sheets to look up a range of different sleep topics and ages. Sometimes it depends whether you're an older person, whether you're a teen, whether you're a menopause, shift workers. That's the other thing too. One thing I should say to anyone listening to this, no matter who you are, think about your sleep advice in the context of your age and your circumstances, because there's not this one size fits all very easily with sleep. It's one of those things that has particular individual differences. I mean, all health aspects have a lot of individual variation, but sleep is a really big one. Like some people, like caffeine, response to light, response to caffeine, how much sleep you need, the timing of your sleep, it's all really different, even amongst siblings. It can be really different. So making sure you don't try and read that, oh my gosh, I heard I've got to get 9 hours, 7 to 9. I only get 6, but 6 might be fine. And particularly in times of grief, you'll be doing high fives if you got 4 sometimes, and then you think that's okay. But if it's been many, many weeks and months and the grief has settled, not that it ever, I mean, did it ever settle? It's hard to, but things have settled a bit. And then you think, well, I think I might need to go and talk to someone. I've tried all the self-help stuff. I've done that and I'm really bad. Like, it's affecting my quality of life. I feel like it's affecting me socially, emotionally, occupationally. Then you definitely have to talk to your GP in the first instance. You might need a sleep study. You might need to just maybe go and see a counsellor, psychologist, to talk through basic sleep stuff, and it's not going to be a sleep disorder, most likely. Most likely it's just that you just haven't really been able to unwind enough, and sometimes you maybe haven't been able to talk about the grief itself. You haven't been being brave for others around you. And then it comes at night, especially when it's quiet. It's the quiet time. You've done all your chores, or the kids are in bed, or your tasks are done, and then it hits you. So, and then it's such a bad time when because you want to sleep then, but it's more likely. So maybe being able to think about ways of being able to process the grief in the daytime a bit more, or at least make some appointments for the future. I think, well, I'm not ready yet, but I'll make an appointment for down the track, and at least you don't have to take it all with you into the bedroom.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. And it's really validating as well, because we get a lot of people who call us outside of our operating hours because we aren't a 24/7 service, even though we're active 365 days a year.
Yeah, it's
We
not all
close the
night.
helpline at 8 o'clock at night, and we get a lot of feedback from people going, oh gosh, I wish I could
I needed
speak to someone at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's why we created all the resources that we do have on our website, including an article around insomnia and how to cope with insomnia while you're grieving. And very much aligned with what you shared earlier around, we call it our East self-care guide, and it's about eating nourishing foods and avoiding stimulating substances, particularly before bedtime, and then there's the activity component, so it's still trying to get a bit of exercise when you can. S represents sleep. Whenever you can, and trying to build a bit of a routine, trying to go to bed at the same time, right? And then T, which is time, and that really speaks to the gentleness of how we should treat ourselves and each other during times of distress, particularly when you're grieving. Not to put any expectation on when you think you should be back to the way you were prior, because inevitably you won't be. This is a life-changing experience. And so be kind to yourself and give yourself time. So it sounds beautifully aligned
we're
with
very
what you
aligned.
promote.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Now, before we wrap things up, I wanted to ask you about your sleep awareness activities coming up and what people can do to help raise awareness for sleep health.
Yeah, thank you. We've got Sleep Health Week in August 5th to August 9th. And on our website, we've got a few sort of ideas for people if they want to raise awareness in their workplace, like have a pajama day, have a morning tea, and everyone wears their slippers or just something like that. Or and just maybe we just encourage people to have conversations, like, you know, around the table, around the water cooler, at wherever, at the football, not so much at the football, but yeah, wherever possible, to just check in about, you know, with yourself and with others about how, you know, that sleep's important, that, you know, we want it elevated up there with food and exercise, because the public health campaigns have been about those sorts of things and smoking, and but we haven't ever yet had it with sleep. The kind of really raising the flag and trying to, so it's just raising awareness. We'll have a number of webinars for free that people could tap into, and the details will be on our website as well. That we've got Black Dog and Beyond Blue and a few other organisations doing webinars with us that week, so people can tune in and learn some practical tips around sleep and mental health.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so really just from sleephealthfoundation.org.au, putting in Sleep Health Week, and you'll see a range of information about Sleep Health Week, and perhaps consider following us on social media and just sort of starting being part of the sleep community too, like being we need to have our army of people who are interested in sleep and interested in talking to others about sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've never met a person who doesn't love their sleep.
No, I
And
know.
doesn't appreciate sleep.
Yeah.
So I don't
Especially
know
when it's
who came up
gone.
with
Yeah.
the phrase "sleep when you're dead," but
Yeah.
never heard anyone mention that.
No. No, I know. I love my sleep. There's still a lot of people who probably should get a bit more, who probably work a bit too hard and don't prioritize it. But yeah, no, I certainly love, I think most people really appreciate sleep, and they
Yeah,
certainly know the difference when they're not getting it. That's for sure.
absolutely. We
Yeah.
definitely can recognize in ourselves how great we feel when we've had a good night's sleep. And you know, there's been some really good insights around, particularly for me, the key takeaway was that not everyone needs the same amount of sleep. And so just reading, obviously, you get a lot of the 7 to 8 hours sleep is good. I know people that can function on a lot less than that. I'm one of those people at the other end of the scale. I need at least 8 to 9 hours sleep to fully function and perform at my best. But all those other elements that you mentioned are important too. So, you know, the consumption of certain foods and substances definitely can affect a person's sleep. And I know that from my own experience. And then the emotional component as well, and the mental component. So taking, you know, I guess taking notice of what activities you're doing before you actually turn in, or, you know, making a plan before you go to bed around, well, I'm going to start winding down now, rather than just go,
right. Yeah.
Turn off my computer and go to bed.
I'll do 50 emails and then turn off the computer and expect to sleep well.
Yeah.
But it's important that if you've already, once you've, if you think you're not sleeping well, you don't want to get too, you have to just actually shrug your shoulders a little bit in the first instance. You can't make yourself sleep well. Like, it's one of those, you know, some other things you can probably, with losing weight or stopping smoking, or, but with sleep, once it's not going so well, you have to just think, oh, well, I have to write off tonight. I can't get too upset about this particular night. I'll get back on track tomorrow. The body will pay it back. I'll probably feel sleepier tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So just trying to roll with it.
About losing sleep over losing sleep.
That's a great spot to end.